The geopolitical and political position of Carpathian Rus puts us at inherent odds against the Western world. An existing nation such as Ukraine will almost always become a battleground between two great European powers, the EU, Germany, and Russia. It happened in 1914, 1939, and now again today. Without Ukraine being in the cultural or political sphere of Russia, Russia becomes geopolitically a distant northeastern country on the fringes of Europe. It also loses an important agriculture and industrial zone with port access on the Black Sea. With it, Ukraine provides a physical buffer by the sheer size of the territory, with the Carpathians protecting the southwest, along with the benefit of being next to the literal heartland of Europe. Do not also discount the desire of the Russian people to stay as a superpower. This idea of great prominence in world affairs goes back to the early formations of the Russian people. For them, Ukraine is not only strategically important, but also ideologically. As for the EU, this is both a geopolitical as well as philosophical one. A primary goal of the European Union and NATO, since its inception, is to limit Russian influence with Europe, while also providing peace between its member countries. These efforts, on some level, had been going on long before the European Union, and they are an essential point in understanding the geopolitics of this region. There has always been a double standard, in which the West judges their own countries versus Russia. When Pan-Anglo and Pan-Germanism were rising in the 19th century, Pan-Slavism was seen as a corrupting and subversive force, as if Russians were playing behind the scenes to fracture European multi-ethnic empires. Sound familiar? It should. In all reality, none of these ways of thinking were better or worse than each other, this progressing to the time of the Soviet Union. Even though NATO has nuclear missiles in Turkey, only hundreds of miles away from Russia, a countermeasure by putting their own in Cuba was seen as aggressive and a provocation. Even now, this shows up in the present with NATO and the European Union, slowly but surely, getting closer to Russia's doorstep. Of course, it was only a verbal agreement to not move an inch closer to Moscow after the fall of USSR, but it was still said. The hypocrisy of all these things is readily apparent to those that take off their rose-colored glasses. Western Europe does what is strategically beneficial for them, not what is the most morally virtuous, as they like to claim. I will not fault them for this. Every other nation works this way, but their word has as much weight as smoke from a fire. What they preach is often not how they behave. Remember this when dealing with them. Where does this leave Rusyns in all of this? It is the fact of our existence which threatens to change what it means to be Ukrainian, as well as to destabilize the larger state. Even if we do not see ourselves how this could be the case, this is what the central government believes. This, along with our perceived and sometimes accurately noted Russophile tendencies by Western nations, puts us in direct geopolitical opposition against them. If we receive political autonomy within Ukraine, this may be seen as a strategic success for Russia by Western Europe. Even if we know that this is mostly nonsense from a Rusyn perspective, this problem was already known back before WWW as well. It is not a new phenomenon. Worried by the influence that Russia would have over its regions, both Austria-Hungary, as well as the First Polish Republic, sought to stifle Rusyn national movements in Carpathian Rus, instead promoting Ukrainophiles. For the most part, this did work. The Russophile movement has been effectively eradicated in Galicia, though in Carpathian Rus, this of course was less successful. The actions during WWW, such as the Thalahov concentration camp, hurt the Russophile and Rusynophile movements within Lemkovina. Almost all major activists and intelligentsia were imprisoned, either deeply scarred or killed. This is one of the main reasons, among many others, why the amount of Ukrainophiles is so much more substantial among Lemko-Rusyns than that of Subcarpathia. Because of this perception of being a threat or geopolitical wildcard, there is little reason for Rusyns to be backed by any Western country. This essentially closes the door to us for any type of Western influence to pressure Ukraine. One could say that the EU may choose to try to buy our loyalty instead, otherwise known as investing millions of dollars into the region. A plan such as this, however, is both more expensive and trickier politically than simply maintaining the current status quo. We could get away with being recognized in Slovakia and Poland because geopolitically, the states and our influence in them are much less important than Ukraine. Even then, We benefited enormously from larger minorities pushing for recognition and autonomy. It would have been much harder to achieve our current status without the Hungarians or Silesians. For now, and possibly ever, our goals do not align with those to the west of us.